Welcome back, focused learners. Today we're diving straight into a brand new explainer. And honestly, we are plunging right into the uncanny forest of our own potential. This is a visceral, grim dark fable totally steeped in Nietzschean philosophy. So just a heads up, this isn't your standard feel-good self-help material. No, this is a rigorous psychological journey tracing the wanderer as he confronts the absolute darkest aspects of his own mind. We're going to map out exactly how the mind traps itself, and more importantly, how it breaks free to achieve true sovereignty. Which brings us to a pretty intense question right off the bat. As the wanderer enters this uncanny forest, he faces the blank canvas of his own potential. But his shadow, his repressed, darker self, glides right past him to wait in the abyss. You face this exact same forest. So when you step into that darkness, will you be devoured by the monsters you refuse to name? Or will they become your companions in the climb?
Part 1. Seduction of the Soothsayer. Okay, let's dive right into this.
Meet the Soothsayer. This figure is essentially a teacher of absolute nihilism and pessimism, and his primary weapon? Well, it's pity. If you're analyzing this trap, the biggest warning sign is when the Soothsayer points to a cry in the distance, claiming some higher man is in distress. It's a totally calculated lure. He wants to draw the traveler into a shared despair, trapping them in what's called a shimmering oasis of the ego. And the result? Just complete social conformity and mutual stagnation.
Let's actually step into the shoes of our fable for a second and look at this inverted diatribe. Imagine this being spoken directly to the parts of you that just crave comfort. You cling to your shimmering oasis of the ego like a drowning man grasping at sea foam. It's powerful, right? The soothsayer tricks you into believing that by conforming, you're somehow surviving. But the brutal reality is that this survival is really just the first stage of your spirit descending into the beast of resentment. It turns you into a literal monument to psychological death.
Part 2. Anatomy of performative grief. Now, what's really interesting about this is how systematically this deception is structured. The wanderer runs into another figure, the sorcerer, and the sorcerer basically orchestrates this staged tragedy of abandonment just to get pity. These displays are essentially decorative shrouds, right? They're worn to mask absolute cowardice. The sorcerer offers up this wine of total despair, practically begging you to retreat from the hard work of self-creation into a passive, psychological death. It's an entire show meant to completely stifle your individual growth. But the wanderer rejects this performative grief because he sees a really grotesque truth. A beautiful tongue, the poetic, pity-seeking words of the sorcerer or the soothsayer, is completely hollow if the mental silence beneath it is just a breeding ground for maggots. Underneath all those beautiful expressions of sorrow lies unconfessed malice. It's rotting away simply because the true self is being denied.
Part 3. Demands of the bone willow. To really grasp this encounter, we need to look at the structural path to sovereignty. It follows a classic dialectic progression. First, you have the thesis. This is the lie we just talked about, right? The social conformity and that shimmering oasis of the ego. Then, the antithesis hits, the necessary friction of your shadow, your internal devil. This contradiction absolutely shatters your mirror of doubt. And finally, the synthesis, achieving self-overcoming and shining as the star of high time. But here's the catch. To get to that synthesis, you absolutely have to pass through the antithesis. And getting through that antithesis? Well, it requires payment. The bone willow, this ancient arbiter of the forest, demands a currency of sin to unlock its pitch-black vault of wisdom. So what does that actually mean for the wanderer? It means he can't pretend to be pure anymore. He has to feed the tree's roots with his unvarnished malice. He has to take the very rot he refuses to name, offer it up, and transform that raw bitterness into the actual fuel for his creative power. Think about this warning for a second. It's another sharp diatribe against the illusions we hold on to. Your logic is a glass fortress built to shield you from the raw, naked impulse of your own atavistic brutality. If you don't confront your secret guilt and feed the bone willow, your character is going to crack under its own structural weight. Your logical defenses are incredibly fragile, and they will melt if you refuse to face the shadow. That is, frankly, the only true measure of your strength.
Part 4. Palido's destructive judgment. Let's move on and see how this builds. Enter Salvio Pallido, the Pale Inquisitor. Pallido is this terrifying force of surgical destruction. He doesn't show up to comfort the wanderer. Oh no, he emerges with atavistic fires to judge the wanderer's unexamined thoughts as total heresy against truth. Palido's entire role is to melt down the ego's false synthesis and expose the primordial brutality that's hiding just beneath the thin paint of civilization. And Palido's judgment, it is absolute. As the source material describes it, this is not a domesticated trial, but a destructive judgment that peels back your gray matter like wet parchment. I mean, wow. He seeks to completely incinerate the heresy of your unexamined thoughts until literally nothing but the ash of truth remains. It is a violent but entirely necessary purging of unexpressed envy and hidden malice. See, Palido views the human skull as a sort of alchemical laboratory. On one hand, you have the lie, the mind brewing sins and distilling justifications out of malice, all wrapped up in those decorative shrouds we mentioned earlier. On the other hand, the truth, Palido's purgative fire. You have to endure this surgical purgation to incinerate your internal monsters. Because if you don't, your mental silence just remains that wasteland, that breeding ground for maggots.
Part 5. Confronting the Cosmic Vampire. So the crucial point is that at this peak, having survived those purgative fires, the wanderer is stripped down to the bare ash of truth. And that's when he encounters the spirit of negation. Think of this entity as a cosmic vampire that mocks all noble truths and values, trying to drag the seeker into a self-inflicted wasteland of absolute nothingness. This is it, the ultimate test of nihilism. Does the wanderer succumb to the meaningless void, or does he stare right into the abyss and, crucially, laugh back? Here we see a stark line drawn between two very different paths. On one side, the soothsayer's nihilism collapses into the void. It flees the shadow and just leads straight to mental decay. But on the other side, the wanderer's path of self-invention. Instead of fleeing, the wanderer absorbs the void. He integrates his internal devils, realizing they were the necessary companions that provided the exact friction needed to force his evolution. It's literally the difference between psychological death and creative sovereignty. Part 6. The Canvas of Invented Values. And this brilliantly illustrates the core truth of our grim-dark fable. The raw bitterness of your suffering is forged into the fuel for creative power. By laughing back at the spirit of negation, that vacuum of meaninglessness isn't a trap anymore. It actually becomes a canvas for the wanderer to invent his own sacred values. The yellow glow of his repressed self is finally truly transformed. Let's summarize the ultimate stakes of this journey. If you refuse the internal sacrifice, say you refuse to face Palido's fires or pay the bone willow, you collapse into absolute nihilism, the void of the glowing eyes. You become the beast of resentment, just forever hoarding your injuries like worthless stones. But if you integrate the shadow, you shine as the star of high time. You become the sole ruler of your existence, having integrated those devils to find the true strength of your own heart. Because your refusal to carry your devils ensures they become your executioners in the abyss, rather than your companions in creation. So, I leave you with this final, chilling thought. Look into the mirror of your shadows right now, or prepare to be consumed by them from within. When you face your own starry abyss, will you become the light of your own existence? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating and challenging explainer with me today. Keep climbing, and we'll see you in the next one.